So let's talk about the out of Africa theory. You've probably heard of it. It's the story of human origins we all learn in school. The idea is simple. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, evolved in one place, Africa. Then, somewhere around 60,000 years ago, a small group of these humans left Africa. They spread across the entire world, and as they spread, they replaced all the other ancient human types they met. They replaced the Neanderthals in Europe, they replaced other archaic humans in Asia. It was a total replacement. Our species came out of Africa and conquered the world. The end. It's a clean story, it's a powerful story, and for a long time it was the story that best fit the evidence we had. The oldest fossils of modern humans were found in Africa. The genetic diversity of people in Africa is far greater than anywhere else on Earth. This suggests Africa is the homeland, the place where our species spent the most time evolving and diversifying before a small group left. That small group carried only a fraction of that genetic diversity with them, which is why non-African populations are so much less genetically diverse. This is called a founder effect. It was strong evidence. The theory made sense. It tied everything together neatly. But science is not about neat stories, it's about evidence. And over the last couple decades, new evidence has shown up. A lot of it. This new evidence doesn't necessarily make the out of Africa theory wrong, but it makes it a lot more complicated. It makes the story messier, more interesting, and a lot more human. The simple story of total replacement is almost certainly wrong. The real story is something different. The first hints that things were more complicated came from fossils. The classic theory said humans left Africa around 60,000 years ago. But archaeologists kept finding things that didn't fit that timeline. In Israel, at sites called Skul and Kavze, they found modern human fossils that were much older. They were dated to around 100,000 to 120,000 years ago. That's way too early. What were modern humans doing in the Middle East tens of thousands of years before the big migration? For a while, scientists thought these might have been failed attempts. Maybe a group of humans ventured out of Africa, lived in the Middle East for a while, and then died out. They were a dead end, not part of the main story. It was a way to make the evidence fit the theory. Then more discoveries came. In China, they found modern human teeth dated to at least 80,000 years ago. In a cave in Greece, a partial skull, Apodema 1, was reanalyzed and dated to a shocking 210,000 years ago. This was a problem for the simple story. Modern humans were clearly outside of Africa much, much earlier than we thought. Were these all just failed migrations? Were they all dead ends that contributed nothing to the people alive today? It seemed possible, but it started to feel like a stretch. The timeline was getting blurry. The clean single migration event was looking less certain. These early explorers showed that our ancestors were restless. They were pushing the boundaries of their world long before the main event we always talked about. But the real revolution didn't come from old bones. It came from something invisible locked inside those bones. It came from ancient DNA. For most of history, all we had were fossils. We could look at the shape of a skull. We could compare the size of a thigh bone. We could make educated guesses about how different human groups were related based on what they looked like. It was like trying to reconstruct a family tree using only a few blurry photographs. You can get the general idea, but the details are missing. Ancient DNA changed that. It was like finding a detailed diary written by the ancestors themselves. A Swedish scientist named Svante Pabo pioneered this field. He and his team figured out how to extract tiny, broken fragments of DNA from fossils that were tens of thousands of years old. It was an incredibly difficult task. DNA breaks down over time. It gets contaminated by the DNA of bacteria, fungi, and even the scientists handling the bones. But they did it. In 2010, they published the first complete draft of the Neanderthal genome. This was the moment everything changed. Now they could compare the DNA of an extinct human species with the DNA of people living today. The out of Africa replacement theory made a clear prediction. If modern humans came out of Africa and completely replaced Neanderthals, then there should be no Neanderthal DNA in us. None at all. We would be 100% Homo sapiens from Africa. That is not what they found. They found that everyone outside of Africa, every single person of European or Asian or Native American descent, carries Neanderthal DNA. The amount is small, around 1 to 3%, but it's there. It's a clear, undeniable genetic echo of a time when our ancestors met another kind of human. People whose ancestry is entirely within sub-Saharan Africa have little to no Neanderthal DNA. This was the smoking gun. Think about what this means. When modern humans came out of Africa, they didn't just replace the Neanderthals. They met them, and they had children with them. This wasn't a war of replacement. It was a story of interaction and interbreeding. It happened somewhere in the Middle East. Probably not long after our ancestors first left Africa. A group of Homo sapiens mixed with a group of Neanderthals, and their descendants then carried that mixed heritage as they spread across the rest of the world. This single discovery blew a hole right through the total replacement model. It wasn't total replacement, it was replacement with a little bit of assimilation. Our species didn't just wipe the slate clean, we absorbed parts of the people we met. That Neanderthal DNA wasn't just junk either. Scientists have been able to figure out what some of these genes do. Some are related to our immune system. It makes sense. Neanderthals had lived in Europe and Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. They were adapted to the local diseases and pathogens. By interbreeding with them, our African ancestors got a quick genetic upgrade, a set of immune system genes already tested against the local bugs. Other Neanderthal genes are related to skin and hair. They might have helped our ancestors adapt to the different levels of sunlight and the colder climates outside of Africa. So, we carry a little bit of Neanderthal in us, a ghost of another kind of human lives on in our DNA. But the story gets even stranger. Around the same time they were mapping the Neanderthal genome, scientists were looking at a tiny bone found in a cave in Siberia. The cave is called Denisova. The bone was just a fragment of a pinky finger from a young girl who lived there more than 50,000 years ago. There wasn't enough of it to tell what kind of human she was just by looking. So they tested its DNA. They expected it to be Neanderthal or maybe an early modern human. It was neither. The DNA was distinct from both. It belonged to a completely new group of archaic humans that no one had ever known about. They called them the Denisovans, after the cave where the finger bone was found. This was a stunning discovery. An entire branch of the human family tree was discovered not by a fossil skull but by a few molecules from a tiny piece of a finger. We still don't really know what the Denisovans looked like. We only have a few teeth and a jawbone to go with the finger bone. We know them almost entirely through their genes. And here's the kicker. Just like they did with the Neanderthal DNA, the scientists compared the Denisovan genome to people alive today. And they found it, but the pattern was different. Denisovan DNA is not widespread in the same way Neanderthal DNA is. It's found at its highest levels in people from Melanesia, people from places like Papua New Guinea, and Australia. These populations can have up to 5% Denisovan DNA. It's also found in smaller amounts across Southeast Asia and East Asia. This adds another layer of complexity. It means that as our ancestors spread east across Asia, they met and interbred with another group of archaic humans, the Denisovans. And it seems there might have been multiple mixing events. The genetic evidence suggests that modern humans interbred with Denisovans at least twice, in different places and at different times. The story was no longer one migration and one interbreeding event. It was a series of migrations and multiple encounters with different groups of ancient relatives across a vast landscape. So, the simple story is gone. The new story is that our ancestors came out of Africa, a place they had called home for hundreds of thousands of years, but the world they entered was not empty. It was already populated by our cousins. In the west, there were the Neanderthals. In the east, there were the Denisovans. And who knows what other groups were out there that we haven't found yet. Our ancestors didn't just walk past them. They lived alongside them, they competed with them, they traded with them, and sometimes they had children with them. We are the result of this complex history. The great majority of our ancestry, more than 90%, is indeed from that African source population. So the out of Africa part of the theory is still very much correct. Our species origin is African. But the total replacement part is wrong. A better name for the theory now might be out of Africa with leaky replacement, or the assimilation model. It acknowledges the main African origin, but also the small but important contributions from the archaic people we met along the way. But the story doesn't just get more complicated outside of Africa, it's gotten more complicated inside Africa too. The classic out of Africa model often treated Africa as a single place. It gave the impression that Homo sapiens evolved in a specific location, like the little Garden of Eden somewhere in East Africa, and then spread out from there. But Africa is a massive continent. It's incredibly diverse in its environments and its people. And new evidence is showing that our evolution within Africa was just as complex as our journey outside of it. For a long time, the oldest Homo sapiens fossils were from Ethiopia in East Africa, dated to around 200,000 years ago. This supported the idea of an East African origin. But then in 2017, a discovery in Morocco on the other side of the continent changed that. At a site called Jebel Irhoud, scientists redated some fossils and found they were Homo sapiens. and they were around 300,000 years old. These fossils didn't look exactly like us. Their faces were modern, but their brain cases were longer and more archaic. They were clearly on our evolutionary line, but an early version of us. Finding them in Morocco, so far from the supposed East African cradle, was a huge deal. It suggests that our species didn't evolve in one small pocket of Africa. Instead, it seems we evolved all across Africa. This has led to a new idea called the Pan-African origin model. The theory goes like this: for hundreds of thousands of years, there were different populations of early humans scattered across the vast African continent. They were separated for long periods by deserts and forests. They started to evolve different physical traits. But they weren't totally isolated. The climate would change. Deserts would become green, and forests would shrink. When that happened, these different groups could connect. They would meet, exchange genes, and then become separated again. Our species, Homo sapiens, didn't emerge in one place at one time. It was forged in this giant, continent-wide network of interbreeding populations. The modern-looking face might have evolved in one population. The rounder brain case might have evolved in another. The genes for certain behaviors might have come from a third. Over time, through this process of separation and connection, these traits spread across the network and eventually came together to form the modern humans, who would later leave the continent. This makes Africa's role in our story even more central, but it breaks down the idea of a single origin point and a single origin time. Our species is the product of a whole continent, not a single valley. It means the deep genetic diversity we see in Africa today is not just a result of a long history in one place, but a long and complex history of mixing and mingling across a huge landscape. So, when we talk about the group that left Africa 60,000 years ago, we're not talking about people from a single tribe. We're talking about a population that was already a mix, a product of this Pan-African network. They were already a combination of different ancient African lineages. This also helps us understand something else. The geneticists have found evidence of ghost populations in the DNA of modern Africans. These are genetic contributions from archaic human groups within Africa that we don't have fossils for yet. It seems that just as our ancestors outside Africa were mixing with Neanderthals and Denisovans, our ancestors who stayed in Africa were also mixing with other, now extinct human relatives on their own continent. The story of interbreeding is not just an out-of-Africa story, it's a human story. It happened everywhere. So where does that leave us? Is the out-of-Africa theory wrong? The answer is no, but also yes. It depends on what you mean by the theory. If you mean the core idea that modern humans first evolved in Africa and then spread to populate the rest of the world, then the theory is absolutely correct. It's stronger than ever. The overwhelming majority of our genetic heritage for every single person on Earth traces back to Africa. Africa is the cradle of humanity. That part is not in doubt, but if you mean the old simple version of the theory, the tall replacement model where one group of superior humans marched out of Africa and completely wiped out everyone they met without any interaction, then yes, that version is wrong. It's dead. The evidence from ancient DNA has shown us that reality was far more complex and far more interesting. The story of human origins is not a simple line from A to B, it's a braided stream. The main current of the stream is African. It's the biggest and most powerful current. But as it flowed across the world, other, smaller streams flowed into it, the Neanderthal stream, the Denisovan stream, and likely others we haven't even discovered yet. These streams mixed with the main current. They changed its composition slightly. And we, all of us alive today, are the water in that stream, carrying the history of all those currents within us. This new understanding doesn't make our story less epic. It makes it more so. It means we have a deep, shared connection, not just to our Homo sapiens ancestors in Africa, but also to the other kinds of humans who walked the earth before us. Their legacy is not gone. It lives on in small ways inside of us. It shapes our health, our appearance, and our ability to adapt to different environments. Science is a process of refinement. A theory is not a dogma set in stone. It's our best explanation for the evidence we have right now. When new evidence appears, a good theory doesn't break. It bends. It adapts. It becomes more detailed and more accurate. The out-of-Africa theory has done exactly that. It has absorbed the shocking revelations from ancient DNA and the surprising fossil finds. It has transformed from a simple story of replacement into a complex saga of migration, interbreeding, and adaptation. The journey to understand our origins is far from over. There are still so many unanswered questions. Who were the Denisovans really? Were there other archaic humans in places like India or Southeast Asia that we mixed with? What other ghost lineages are hiding in our DNA? What was the process of our evolution within Africa really like? Each new fossil, each new sample of ancient DNA adds another piece to the puzzle. And it almost never makes the picture simpler. It always adds a new twist, a new connection, a new mystery. The simple story we learned in school is gone. In its place is a story that is messy, complicated, and still being written. And that's a much better story. It feels more real, it feels more human. We are not a species that arose in isolation. We are, and have always been, a product of the connections we make. Our DNA proves it.